Good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are. For those who are people in the morning, good morning to you. And those are people who are watching at night, good evening to you. It's early afternoon right now in Eretz HaKodesh, in Eretz Yisrael, in HaKodesh, Yerushalayim. And we're broadcasting here today and bringing you this gift, a tremendous gift from Yeshivas Rabbi Akiva in the old city of Yerushalayim. What we're going to do is to give you a little bit of a sampling of some DikDuk that's going to be very valuable to everybody, whether you're brand new as a novice learning Hebrew for the first time, or whether you're learning Hebrew as almost not everybody, but very few people are familiar with the technicalities of the grammar of the Hebrew language. We know how to translate words, but we don't know why we translate them and that we memorize them. But there's a methodology that will help, especially the new student. We're going to try to help today with a lesson to tell you how to identify the shorish, the root of a Hebrew word. Now, Hebrew words are made up of primarily, especially the verbs, 3-letter roots. You have 3 letters, right, from the Hebrew alphabet of 22 letters that will make up the primal meaning of the word. Meaning it will have the taste, the flavor of that, but those 3 letters will have a particular flavor that will inflect, will be involved in all the different forms of the word, right, to give you different meanings, but based around the same primal meaning. An example. Let me add one more thing. Unlike English, Hebrew is a combination. The words have prefix and they have root, they have suffix. Prefix comes before the word, suffix after the word, additional letters from the root, which is the primary part of the word, even infix letters, letters that come in between root letters. We want to find in Hebrew verbs especially the 3 root letters. How do we do that? We're new at it. We look at a word, it could have 3 letters. Some of them maybe all 3 root letters. It may be even with 3 letters, you may have some of the letters drop away. How do you know it's root, and how do you know it's prefix, and how do you know it's suffix? There's a tool that has been made available to us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the way that he presented the language that allows us, not all words, but I would say 50% at least of the words, if not more, 75% of the words we look at, to know what's going to be the root letters, and then we're going to figure out what comes before and after. Because in Hebrew, unlike any other language that I know, Hebrew, you can take one 3-letter root and you can make between 500 and 750 words from the one root. And all of those words have the root letters, the 3 root letters that give you the primal meaning of that root. And then they're inflected through the letters that are added to it to let you know what your root that you're starting in. Let's talk about, for instance, Resh Aleph Hey. Means to see or to look. The primary meaning of that root has something to do with the eyes and vision. If I say Aleph Kaf Lamed, the 3 root letters, that has something to do with eating. It can be eating, it can be digesting, it can be gorging, it can be feeding. But they all have to do, the word I said first, the Resh Aleph Hey, has to do with looking. It means seeing, showing, staring, envisioning. All these words have that same root in the word. And then they'll be inflected with letters and vowels to change slightly the inflection of that primary meaning, but it will always have that primary meaning behind the whole thing. So now, and I see a lot of people, I would say this would be only for new students, but I meet so many people that know the language and translate it well. But they have no idea, they just know that's what the word reads like, but they don't understand this concept of root. So I'd like to give us a tool, an incredible tool, to be able to identify the root of the word that you're looking at. And then after you have that, everything's either going to be a prefix, something that comes before the root, a suffix, something that comes after the root, and something that comes in between the root letters. And what those additional letters do at the beginning and at the end and in the middle, they inflect the 3 root letters to have its primary meaning based on that form. All right? So you'll see up on the screen a chart that gives you 4 categories of roots, of letters in the Hebrew language, 4 classifications. All right? You either have a root, 1. 2, you have a prefix. Number 3, you have a suffix. And number 4, you have an infix. Category 1 are going to be letters that are only root letters. So when you see them in the word, you know one thing for sure. You're in the root of your word. Category 2 are letters, and let me add a point on that. Every letter can potentially be a root letter. Category 1, all the letters are only going to be root letters. Category 2, because every letter can be a root letter, it could be a root letter, but it can also be a prefix when it comes at the beginning of the word. Category 3 are letters that can be a root, because everything can be a root letter, or they can serve as prefixes, or they can serve as suffixes. And category 4, the wild card of the Hebrew language, Vavs and Yuds, can be a root letter, can be a prefix letter, can be a suffix letter, and those 2 letters, Vav and Yud, can enter in the space between 2 root letters to give them additional meanings. All right? Prefix, suffix, infix, and root. Let's start off. Category 1, only root letters. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking in the Hebrew language now. Aramaic has slight variations. We'll do that another time. In the Hebrew language, these 12 letters, that means more than 50% of the Hebrew language can only be root letters. You hear that? More than half of the letters that you're going to that come out in the Hebrew of the 22, 12 of them can only be root letters. Those letters are Gimel Daled. We start off with God, GD. Zayin Chet Tet. Samech through Sin. Samech, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi, Kuf, Resh, and Sin. Not Shin, Sin. Can only be root letters. If you see one of those letters in a word, forget about thinking about anything except it's got to be a root letter. It's not like all 22 letters serve different purposes and can be every purpose. These 12 letters can only be root letters. What a gift. Now you look at a word. Even if you're a brand new student trying to identify words, you can start finding out what your root is in your word. By finding 3 of these letters in a word, you got the root. I'm not talking about nouns and special words that we created in the English language where we didn't have Hebrew words from the Torah. Those can have more root letters. But verbs either have 3 root letters, and occasionally there's 4 root letter verbs where the first and second letter repeat themselves as the second and third as the third and fourth letter. But we'll leave that on the side right now. We're going to work with the 3 root letter system right now. And those 4 root letters are going to be very obvious, because 1 and 2 are going to be repeated again as 1 and 2 again. Otherwise, you're going to see them double them themselves. All right? Again, Gimel Daled, Zayin Chet Tet, Samech through Sin. Those 12 letters, only root letters. This is invaluable, by the way, to memorize these, because you're going to use it every time you look at a word. If you want to do word identification and translation, you better have these letters down in your head, right? And work on them to memorize them. So when I see a gimel, I say root letter. I have no choice. I see samech, I say a root letter. I can suddenly take along, and now I see a word that has 7 letters in it. And I see a gimel, a daled, and a samech. I go, oh, that's my root. So anything that comes before that's a prefix. Anything that comes after that is a suffix. And a vav or a yud in between any of those letters will be an infix. And I will be able then to go to my dictionary, right? I highly recommend the dictionary of this dictionary called the Alkali, if you can find it. It comes with a lot of volumes, has 4 volumes. 3 of them are English to Hebrew. You don't really need those. If you can ever find the Alkali of Hebrew to English, you want to get it. It's an excellent dictionary. It's biblically based. Any dictionary will do, but this is the best one there is. It brings down all the forms. And then once you have the root, you can look up the root. And under the root, it's going to tell you all the different forms, their basic meanings. Tell you noun forms of it under the root. Tell you verb forms under the root. Right? Very valuable. All right, again, get your first category, only roots. Gimel Daled, Zayin Chet Tet, Samech through Sin. 2, category 2. The letter can be a root letter, because all letters can be root letters. Or, if there's the beginning of the word, they can be a prefix. At the beginning of the word, they can be a root letter, or they can be a prefix. They're not forced into either one. You have to determine what it is. If you have 3 root letters already that you know from category 1, and then you put one of these letters, Aleph, Beis, Lamed, and Shin, in front of the word, then that's a prefix. If you have one of these letters and you're not sure what it is, then you have to work it out to figure out whether it's a prefix or a root letter. Aleph is the first letter that can be either a root letter or a prefix. At the beginning of the word, Aleph always means I will. There's no other word in the Hebrew language to say I will in the future tense by the proper form by using an Aleph as a prefix. There's a thing called a reversing vav that you can do it another way. Leave that. That's exceptional. It's special. The Aleph at the beginning of the word is either a root letter or it means I will. Inside the word already, if it's in the middle of the word, at the end of the word, then it's got to be a root letter. It can't be anything else. It's either a prefix or a root. Once it's not at the beginning of the word, then it's not a prefix, then it becomes a root letter. Beis at the beginning of the word is a preposition meaning in or with. If it's the beginning of the word, it can be a root letter or it can mean in or with. And then once it gets into the word, not in the first letter, not at the beginning of the word, but in the middle or the end, then you know it's another root letter. Lamed is a prefix to mean 2 or 4 as a preposition, or it means the infinitive form. To run, to laugh, to sing, to teach, to learn. Those are all infinitives. And that Lamed is the sign of the infinitive in the Hebrew language. If it's the beginning of the word, it can be a prefix of the infinitive form, or it can be a prefix 2 or 4 as a preposition. Once it goes out of the beginning of the word, it's inside the word, it's a root letter for sure, and it can no longer be a preposition. A prefix, excuse me. And finally, Shin means that or which, or when, in the beginning of the word. If it's not the beginning of the word, if it's the beginning of the word, it can be either a prefix or a root letter. One side it's inside the word, it's got to be a root letter. So look what you have right now. The Rabbanu Shalom, who created the Hebrew language, created the world with the Hebrew language. The letters and the vowels were the beginning of the creation. 32 times in the book of Bereshis, the first book of Bereshis, it mentions the word Elohim. Those represent the 22 letters and the 10 vowels, the Esser Sfirot, for which the world was created, right? Here it is. And God set it up in a very orderly fashion. Not surprisingly, as you notice the universe, you may notice the universe is also quite orderly. The movement of the planets and the stars and the sun and all, it seems to have certain patterns to stay together. Same thing with the language. Formed by the same God who is very, very orderly. Has things in a very, very orderly fashion. And therefore you have now in the second group, you have Aleph, Lamed, Beis, and Shin. Now watch this one. You have 22 letters, 23 letters in the Hebrew language. We'll say because we're going to use Shin and Sin differently. Why? Sin can only be a root letter, but Shin can be a prefix in a root letter, so in a different category. So I'm going to divide. They're really one letter. They have the same numerical value. They never translate the same, by the way. If you have a letter that has a Shin, and you have a letter that has a Sin, the meaning of the words will not be the same. They have different meanings as one of the root letters. As a prefix, Shin only is the prefix for that or which. Sin cannot be a prefix, it must be a root letter. But look what you have now, you got 23 letters. The first category had 12 letters, Gimel, Daled, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Samech through Sin. Second category had 4 letters, Aleph, Beis, Lamed, and Shin. If that Aleph, Beis, Lamed, and Shin is not at the beginning of the word, guess what? It's got to be a root letter. So now we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Rabbanu Shalom, has created a language that other than Aleph, Beis, Lamed, and Shin at the beginning of the word being a prefix anywhere else is a root letter, you now have how many? Add 12 and 4. If you need to take off your shoes, it's 16. Whoa! 16 of the letters are going to be root letters. You're going to know what the root of your word is. If Aleph, Beis, Lamed, and Shin is not at the beginning of the word, it's going to go with the other 12. You are going to know the root of your word because 16 out of the 23 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are only going to be root letters. Wow, what an incredible thing. I'm now no longer looking at just letters. I now have a conscious way to be able to determine what the primary focus of the letters of my word are to identify its primal meaning. Where most people, if you knew, you look at it, well, who knows? It's the beginning and they all look the same. They're all letters. Aren't they all equal? They're absolutely not all equal. All right? Now, the overwhelming majority of letters in the Hebrew language, right, we see are going to be root letters. Category 3 and 4 are going to be the letters that are used as inflectors. The letters in category 3 and 4, they can also be root letters, but unlike category 1, which is only root letters, and category 2, which is mostly root letters if they're not at the beginning of the word, category 3 and 4 are the letters, the 7 letters that God uses in His creation of the language to inflect the meaning of words. And they are, in category 3, which are letters that can be a prefix, they can come before the root, or they can come after the root. And if certainly they can be a root letter, but you're going to find in category 3 those letters, if we're going to talk percentages, 75, 80% of the time, if not more, they're going to be a prefix or a suffix. And maybe 10% or 20% of the time they're going to be a root letter. Amazing. If I see one of these letters, Hey, Kaf, Mem, Nun, or Taf, Hey, Kaf, Mem, Nun, or Taf at the beginning of the word, at the end of the word, I'm almost going to be for sure dealing with a prefix or a suffix. They can be a root in the beginning and end, but most of the time in the beginning and end they're going to be a prefix and a suffix. If they come in between 2 root letters, then they got to be a root letter, because they can't go in between. They only have 3 positions: prefix, suffix, or root. So therefore, if one of these letters, if a mem comes in the middle of a word, it's going to be a root letter. If it's the beginning or the end, it could be a root letter, but more likely it's going to be a prefix or a suffix. Hey, Kaf, Mem, Nun, and Taf. And finally, Vav and Yud. I'm stuck, folks. I don't have any explanation. When you see Vav and Yud, if it's the beginning of the word, it could be a prefix or a root letter. If it's the end of the word, it can be a suffix or a root letter. And even if it's in between 2 other root letters, it can be an infix, a letter that is part of the root, right? Or it can be an infix that's serving to inflect the word, to give it its meaning, right? To give it its translation. Active, passive, masculine, feminine, noun, verb, and so on. Inside, it can also be one of the root letters, or it can be an infix. That lesson right there that you see right now, if you look at your chart and you learn these, you will now be able to look at any word in the Hebrew language. Now, some of them you're going to look at, and they're going to have all prefix letters in it, because a prefix letter can be a prefix, a suffix, right? It can't be, they're not going to be prefix, they can function as that. You look at a word, right? The name of God, Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, has a Hey, a Vav, and a Yud. Those are the 3 primary letters, and there, they can be anything. Well, Hey can only be a prefix, but Vav and Yud can be inside, outside, beginning, and middle, right? But most of the words that you look at, the greatest percentage, you'll be able to start looking at words and determining, this is the root, go to the dictionary, look up the meaning, you'll know the primal meaning, and then you're going to start learning, B'ezras Hashem, at some point, what functions, how they're translated at the beginning of a word, or at the end of the word, in the middle of the word, right? How you translate them, what functions they serve as prefix, suffix, and infix. And you will now have yourself a tool to start learning the language and picking things out. Even though you don't know any words yet, you'll be able to at least start pinpointing and looking things up and knowing how to use the letters to guide and direct you to the meaning of a word. This is lesson number 1. This is Pawn to Kings 4 in chess language. If you'll have this tool in your belt, in your pocket, you'll then be able to start working with the Hebrew language to dissect, take words apart, figure out what all the parts are functioning as, and come up with the meaning of a word. I bless you to be successful. Anybody needs any help with this? Anybody wants any more information? Shalom Gold is available when I'm not sleeping, which isn't very much, at least 24/6. If you're in Yerushalayim, you come visit, it's 24/7. But I'm happy to help. I just love it. It's given me strength to be able to be precise and accurate and understand how to translate the language. Have a great day. Shalom Aleichem from Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh. I hope this is helpful, and I hear from you and can do more to help you to be able to start understanding the Hebrew language. Have a good day.